In March, cold wind from the Front Range swept down, cutting across the misty surface of Union Reservoir. On the shore, the search team hunched over sonar equipment, the dull ping echoing through the silent air. Beneath more than 2 decades of thick mud, something lay still, something the people of Boulder thought time had swallowed forever. A red 1984 Pontiac Fiero. A young woman in a nurse's uniform, and a secret buried for 26 years. On the night of October 1999, Maggie Chandler, 24, left her late shift at Boulder Community Hospital. She never made it home. A massive search turned up nothing, leaving only one line in the file: probable accident, no recovery. But her mother knew Maggie would never leave willingly. 25 years later, a young investigator discovered the case had never been scanned with multi-beam sonar. When the bathymetric map was reopened, the truth began rising from the dark water. A car frame appeared. Its red paint faded. The license plate was broken, but the first 3 characters remained visible: 4DN. From that moment, a case long forgotten came back to life. DNA, trace evidence, and mechanical data slowly pieced together the fragments of that final night. In Colorado's cold snow, justice began to move, slowly but surely. And when the killer's name finally surfaced, it wasn't some stranger lurking in the shadows. It was someone who had worked alongside Maggie, someone the entire hospital had trusted. This is not just the story of a cold case cracked by DNA and sonar. It's a powerful reminder that the truth doesn't die. It only waits to be heard. And sometimes justice doesn't need gunfire or a courtroom verdict. It only needs one ping echoing from the bottom of a lake. Before we dive deeper into this shocking true story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you love journeys into forgotten justice, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next part. Night in Boulder was silent and bone-chillingly cold. Winds from the Flatirons poured down, sweeping empty streets, carrying the dampness of late October drizzle. Sodium lights cast a dull yellow glow through the fog, stretching across wet asphalt and bathing the hospital grounds in dim, hazy light. The wall clock in the lobby of Boulder Community Hospital read 11:18 p.m. when Maggie Chandler, 24, night shift nurse, stepped out the back door of the nursing wing. She had just finished a grueling 12-hour shift, eyes ringed with fatigue, shoulders slumped under a thin sweater. She paused for a moment before heading down the corridor to the parking lot, clutching her bag strapped tightly, eyes scanning as if searching for something. The steady hum of ventilation fans mixed with the whistle of wind through the vents. In the far corner, a fluorescent light flickered and went out, darkness swallowing the space behind her. Maggie took a deep breath, steadied herself, and walked faster. Her heels clicked sharply on the concrete, the sound echoing in the emptiness. Each time her own footsteps bounced back, she glanced over her shoulder, only rows of parked cars in the fog, and trembling streetlights. Not a soul. At the far end of the lot, her red Pontiac Fiero sat alone beneath a leaning lamp, its body coated in a thin layer of mist. She opened the door, tossed her medical bag onto the passenger seat, and started the engine. It coughed hoarsely, then settled into a steady rumble. Maggie turned on the headlights, her hand still trembling slightly on the wheel. The security camera mounted on the parking garage roof captured the final frame, red taillights reflecting off wet pavement as the car turned through the hospital gate and melted into the thick fog along the road toward Longmont. Seconds later, the lights vanished. No one ever saw Maggie Chandler again. The next morning, Boulder's sky was gray and overcast. Weak sunlight filtered through low clouds, falling on her small apartment on Alpine Drive. The door was still locked, curtains drawn. On the kitchen table, a half-finished cup of coffee from the night before sat cold. The bed was neatly made, no rumpled sheets or pillows. Her nursing uniform hung on the back of a chair. Her work bag sat by the door, mobile phone on the table with its charging light still blinking. Everything said she had never come home. Her mother, Linda Chandler, called all morning. The phone rang and rang, then went silent. By noon, worry had turned to real fear. Hands shaking, She dialed the Boulder County Sheriff's Office. When the dispatcher answered, it took her several seconds to get the words out, choking on each one. "My daughter's missing. She didn't come home after work last night." On the other end of the line, the officer only managed to ask the young woman's name before Linda Chandler couldn't say more. Her small kitchen fell silent, except for the ticking clock and cold wind slipping through the window crack. Just 30 minutes after the Boulder County Sheriff's Office received the missing person report for Maggie Chandler, 2 detectives were dispatched to Boulder Community Hospital, her last known workplace. The hospital was unnaturally quiet, corridors gleaming under harsh white lights, and the familiar smell of disinfectant. At the security desk, night guard Gerald Quinn handed over a VHS tape from the old camera system. "She clocked out around 11:20 p.m., left alone," he said. The detectives played the tape. In the grainy, static-filled footage, Maggie appeared clearly under the yellow sodium lights. She walked quickly, got into her red Pontiac Fiero. As the car pulled away, in the far corner of the frame, a male figure in a light-colored jacket briefly appeared between the rows of cars, stood still for a few seconds, then vanished. No face visible, only a tall, thin silhouette. The image was too blurry to identify. The tech team copied the tape and sealed it in an evidence bag. The initial report noted, possible male subject near victim's vehicle, identity unknown. From the hospital, investigators shifted focus to Highway Co 119, the only route connecting Boulder to Longmont, the road Maggie took home every night. Dusk was falling, thick clouds covering the mountains to the west, the air heavy with the smell of wet earth. As the patrol car crawled along the edge of Union Reservoir, headlights swept across an odd patch of mud beside the road, a set of tire tracks veering sideways down the low grass toward the water's edge. They stopped. Under flashlight beams, the skid marks stretched about 3 meters, soil compacted, ending at a gentle slope into the lake. No collision damage, no glass shards, no oil slicks. The water's surface was mirror still, reflecting the faint red of sunset. A young officer peered over the edge and said quietly, "If a car went in here, it's deep under by now." The area was cordoned off, stakes driven in, the slope angle measured. A small boat was brought in, 2 local divers called. They used single-beam sonar to scan a 30-meter radius. The screen showed only dense, blurry waves. The engine hummed steadily against the wind, no large metal returns. Underwater visibility was less than half a meter, just thick mud and roots. After 2 hours, they surfaced with nothing suspicious. Report summary: no physical evidence recovered. That night, police returned to the hospital for more statements. One nurse recalled Maggie leaving the locker room earlier than usual, looking anxious. She said Maggie had mentioned feeling followed whenever she left night shifts, but never said who. A janitor confirmed hearing a small engine start around 11:30, matching the timestamp of the Fiero leaving the lot. When the full security footage was reviewed, they noticed the camera covering the exit gate was heavily distorted. The mid-90s system recorded only black and white, no audio, and lacked resolution to read license plates. Still, police flagged the man in the light jacket near Maggie's car, the only unusual detail that night. The next morning, the team returned to the lake. Mist lay thick over the water, absolute silence. They walked the shore looking for more tire marks, or dropped items, finding only a few broken blades of grass, and a half-buried bottle cap. Weather was turning colder, strong winds making underwater searches difficult. Lead detective Mark Ellison called a temporary halt. "Not enough to confirm an accident. We need more from family and relationships." In the day's final report he wrote briefly, "Search initiated at Union Reservoir. No debris, no confirmed accident site. Further inquiry pending." On the drive back, the patrol car passed slowly by the hospital parking lot entrance, where the fluorescent light still flickered in the wind. Through the fogged window, the spot where Maggie had walked that night now looked empty and cold. A young detective glanced back and said softly, "If the car really is down there, It's somewhere in that lake. At the time, no one knew that offhand remark would become the only remaining clue in a disappearance that would stay unsolved for the next 26 years. With the search around Union Reservoir yielding no trace, police turned to understanding who Maggie Chandler really was, her habits, relationships, anything that might explain why she vanished. In her file, Maggie Chandler, 24, night shift nurse at Boulder Community Hospital, lived alone in a small Longmont apartment. Her 2 young daughters spent weekends with their father. Colleagues described her as dedicated, quiet, and a little tough, someone who rarely complained about life, except for the exhaustion of long shifts. She had been separated nearly a year. The divorce was nearing finalization. When Detective Mark Ellison visited her workplace, he heard the same things repeatedly. No unusual behavior, just tired and stressed lately. One nurse, Linda Grant, remembered. She said she felt watched, especially leaving the hospital. I saw her look back toward the parking lot several times, like someone was standing in the dark. Those details caught Ellison's attention. He re-examined hospital area cameras, but the 1999 system was primitive. Only one blurry angle captured the figure in the light jacket near Maggie's car, too unclear for identification. For clarity, Ellison and the team visited her Maple Street apartment. Everything was untouched, no signs of struggle or hurried packing. 2 unwashed bowls sat on the table. The fridge held recently bought milk and food. In the bedroom, the bed was neatly made, suitcases present, work bag still containing her ID, and shift notebook. Everything pointed to one conclusion: Maggie had no intention of leaving. Psych reports and medical records pulled from the hospital showed no history of depression, no sedatives or mental health issues. Even in a personal planner found on her desk, she had written upcoming plans: Mom's birthday, buy Ashley a winter coat, weekend shift with Group B. Investigators ruled out voluntary disappearance. She had a stable life, steady job, and 2 little girls she loved deeply. With that eliminated, police dug into close relationships. First, ex-husband Ryan Chandler, a technician in Louisville. Divorce records showed arguments over custody, but no reports of violence or threats. Ryan said he was on the night shift when Maggie disappeared. Factory cameras confirmed it. The team interviewed co-workers, regular patients, and doctors she worked with. One name kept coming up: Dr. Thomas Avery, 35, internal medicine, described as unusually close to Maggie. They often worked the same shifts and sometimes left together. Some said they briefly dated. Others said Avery was overly attentive. Hospital records showed Avery had a clean reputation, no disciplinary issues, but the night guard clearly remembered. I saw them argue in the parking lot a few times. One night she was crying in her car, and he grabbed the door to keep her from closing it. Though there was no hard proof, the detail was flagged separately. Phone records from Maggie's landline revealed several short calls to Avery's number in the week before she vanished, each just over a minute, usually at the end of her shift. No recordings, but the timing matched coworker comments that she avoided talking about him even though they were in the same department. When detectives interviewed Avery, he was cooperative and calm. I just helped her carry files home a couple times. Nothing more, he said. That night I walked her to her car and went back to my office. She was tired and wanted to leave early. Avery said he left the hospital at 10:50 p.m. and provided his signed shift log. Police couldn't disprove it. There was no contradicting evidence yet. Still, professional instinct told Ellison it wasn't that simple. He wrote in his report, something about the way Avery spoke: too calm, too prepared. Innocent people are usually rattled. He wasn't. After more than 30 interviews, the team's interim conclusion: Maggie had no enemies, no debt, no mental health red flags. But one thing stood out unexplained: the feeling of being followed and the man in the light jacket in the parking lot. Ellison summarized in the file: Maggie Chandler, female, 24, night nurse, stable personality, No reason to leave voluntarily. High probability victim of criminal act. Continue investigating last person known to have contact with her at the hospital. As he left the apartment for the last time, late afternoon light poured through the living room window, falling on a framed photo of Maggie with her 2 daughters at a park. Her smile in the picture made Ellison pause for a long time. He knew one thing for certain: people with plans for tomorrow don't just disappear into the night. When the victim's profile had become clear, the police's next investigative direction focused on the last people to have contact with Maggie Chandler before she vanished. The initial shortlist had 3 names, but only one was considered the most suspicious: Dr. Thomas Avery. First, the police looked at Ryan Chandler, Maggie's ex-husband. He worked the night shift as a technician at a factory in Louisville. His supervisor confirmed he was present the entire shift. Security cameras inside showed him at his machine station, never leaving the area. His work schedule matched his statement, and there was nothing to suggest he could have been in the Boulder or Longmont area that night. Their marital conflicts had only ever been about child custody. There were no reports of violence or threats. After full verification, Ryan was ruled out. With Ryan eliminated, the entire team's attention turned to the hospital, the last place Maggie was seen leaving. One security guard on duty gave a notable detail. He saw Maggie and Avery talking beside her red Pontiac Fiero, and it looked tense. Maggie was standing close to the driver's door, clutching her purse, while Avery stood on the opposite side, leaning slightly toward her. It wasn't a big argument, the guard said, but it definitely wasn't a friendly conversation. Several co-workers also confirmed that Maggie and Avery had once been close, but afterward, she had deliberately kept her distance. One nurse said Maggie no longer wanted to walk to the parking lot alone, and sometimes asked someone to go with her, behavior that had been unusual for her before. Still, no one had ever heard her speak directly about Avery, except for one vague comment: "I want everything to be clear. I don't want any more misunderstandings." When invited to the police station, Avery was calm and cooperative, even overly friendly. He described his relationship with Maggie as good colleagues, who sometimes helped each other at work. Regarding the night she disappeared, Avery said he had only walked her out to the parking lot to say goodbye, then returned to his office to finish patient charts. But that detail did not fully match the data the police obtained. When hospital badge swipe logs were reviewed, technicians found that Avery had left the building significantly later than he claimed. He offered no clear explanation for the discrepancy. His only response was, "I don't remember exactly. I was very tired that day." That inconsistency caused Avery's file to thicken quickly. Lead investigator Mark Ellison noted, "Innocent people try to recall details, liars try to keep things vague." Police requested the parking lot surveillance footage. Though the image was blurry and faces couldn't be identified, the silhouette of a man in a light-colored jacket standing next to Maggie's car matched the guard's description. When asked if that was him in the video, Avery replied, "It could be me, I'm not sure. I often wear light-colored jackets." The answer neither confirmed nor denied anything, and revealed an unusual lack of certainty. Yet at that point, everything remained only suspicion. No witness saw Avery get into the car with Maggie. No camera captured a license plate or the car's direction of travel. Their relationship, however murky, was not enough to establish criminal motive. Ellison kept looking for signs of conflict. One coworker said they had seen Maggie avoid Avery in the hallways a few times. Another had heard them have minor arguments about shift schedules. Everything was fragmented, noticeable, but not enough to form a complete picture. A second interview with Avery only made things more unclear. When asked again about the time he left the hospital, he gave evasive answers and denied any conflict. When asked whether he had followed Maggie beyond the parking lot, he pressed his lips together and said, "No, I only walked her to her car. She wanted to go home right away." There was no physical evidence, no direct witness, and no proof he had left the hospital grounds in the same direction as Maggie. The red flags were all in his demeanor and inconsistencies, but that wasn't enough to charge him. The investigative team had to face reality. That night, Maggie disappeared with her Fiero. Yet there were no signs of an accident, no debris, no reported noises. Those facts made the natural accident theory increasingly untenable. Still, concluding Avery was involved required clearer evidence. When the interrogation ended, Avery was allowed to leave. He walked out of the room quietly, straightening his collar like a man confident he had just passed a test. Ellison watched him go, the uneasy feeling still clinging to him. He wrote the final note in that day's report, not enough evidence to prosecute. However, every sign indicates Maggie did not disappear due to an accident. The last person to speak with her, Avery, remains at the center of every unanswered question. Though no one could yet be charged, the case officially shifted direction. Traffic accident, once the leading theory, was now a backup hypothesis, kept in the file as a remote possibility. Police prepared to widen the search, but in the hearts of many investigators, especially Ellison, a quiet truth was forming. Something in that parking lot that night had gone far beyond the initial assumptions. With the leads tied to Avery still insufficient for a breakthrough, the investigation returned to the most critical task: finding the car. In most missing persons cases involving a vehicle, the car is the key that unlocks the whole truth. If they found it, they could determine whether Maggie had suffered an accident or had been taken somewhere by someone with different intentions. The team began expanding the search within a 15-mile radius of Boulder Community Hospital. They compiled lists of lakes, ponds, low-lying areas, and road sections that could be slippery or dangerous. Union Reservoir, Lagerman Lake, Coot Lake, the small canal system near Boulder Creek, the winding farm roads, everyone was added to the sweep. Each area was re-examined using the tools available at the time. Helicopters scanning water surfaces, scent dogs, single-beam sonar mounted on small boats, technology that was still primitive and heavily dependent on the operator's experience. Many local volunteers joined the searches, hoping to spot the red of a Pontiac Fiero somewhere beneath the water. Tips from the public poured into the hotline. "I saw a red car parked near the public park," one caller said. "I think I saw an old Fiero in a field up north," another claimed. Every call was carefully checked. All led to dead ends, vehicles that only matched the color, or simple mistakes in the community's anxious atmosphere. Meanwhile, the technical team kept sweeping Union Reservoir, where tire skid marks had been found near the grassy edge. The marks were faint, and there was no debris, but they were enough to draw attention. The grass there sloped gently down to the water, forming a natural roll path if a car lost control. However, any traces that might have confirmed the direction of the skid had been almost completely washed away by rain and agricultural irrigation. The local dive team deployed single-beam sonar, the kind that only gives a straight vertical slice of the lake bottom. If an object lay at an angle, was covered in mud, or had fallen into a steep trench, single-beam sonar was nearly useless. The data came back full of noise streaks. Nothing resembled a car. One veteran diver said, "If something's in that lake, it's sleeping under thick mud, and we're not going to see it with this equipment." The situation was no better at the other lakes. Lagerman Lake was too shallow and constantly murky. Coot Lake had a soft mud bottom that could swallow metal deep and out of scanning range. The branches of canals near Boulder Creek had strong currents, unsuitable for a car crash scene. All those details were recorded, evaluated, and areas were ruled out one by one. In internal briefings, investigator Ellison kept asking, if Maggie had an accident, wouldn't someone have heard the car hit the water? Wouldn't someone have seen headlights reflecting? Many officers agreed the accident scenario was becoming less convincing, but no evidence was solid enough to shift the investigation. Everything still revolved around one question: where is the car? Terrain analysts were brought in to map possible routes Maggie might have taken. They plotted shortcuts, dirt roads, farm turnoffs, and evening traffic avoidance routes. Still, her path seemed to vanish from the map the moment the hospital camera recorded her taillights. The frequent meetings produced no new results. The case file grew thicker every day but still lacked a single piece that fit. Residents kept passing around theories: accident, abduction, voluntary disappearance, but police could confirm none of them. An internal report was drafted summarizing the searched areas. The conclusion kept Ellison staring at the page for a long time. No physical evidence has been found, indicating the victim's vehicle entered the water. Current data is insufficient to determine the mechanism of disappearance. The accident possibility remains recorded as the official hypothesis, though no clear supporting signs exist. Those in the room knew that conclusion was only a way to keep the file alive without closing it immediately. Accident was the only line of inquiry not yet disproven, not because it was persuasive, but because it was the least unreasonable option in the absence of evidence. The workday ended with a shared heaviness. They had searched everywhere. Reason suggested the car could be, yet all they had was emptiness. An emptiness as cold and wide as the surface of Union Reservoir, and as deep as the unanswered questions. The investigation gradually ground to a stall. Every reasonable avenue had been checked, yet no lead brought the team any closer to the Pontiac Fiero or to Maggie herself. The data collected over weeks only reinforced a bitter reality. Every trace had vanished as if deliberately erased from the face of Boulder County. In the Boulder Police Department conference room, investigators kept flipping through Maggie's photo, trying to find any overlooked detail. Personal relationship files had been reviewed multiple times. Ryan Chandler, ex-husband, had a proven alibi. Co-workers and friends showed no red flags. Patients who had been close to Maggie were unrelated. That left Avery, but aside from his lack of transparency and a few murky points, there was no physical evidence tying him to the disappearance. The wall maps were covered with pins marking searched areas, from Union Reservoir to small suburban lakes, from irrigation canals to abandoned dirt roads. Everything had been swept repeatedly. The water rescue team reported that single-beam sonar from that era could not guarantee detection of a small object like a Fiero, especially if the car was on its side or buried deep in mud. Repeating the searches with the old technology yielded almost no new information. Rumors in the community grew louder by the day. Some believed Maggie had run off with someone, others said she was kidnapped. Extreme theories claimed she was hidden somewhere in the forest or in abandoned industrial sites. Police followed up on every tip, only to rule out each possibility. A sense of failure crept into every meeting. They had done everything possible, but the silence of the scene was stronger than any effort. Lead investigator Mark Ellison, who had been on the case from day one, began to accept a hard truth: there was no further evidence to keep going. Police resources were limited, and new cases appeared every day. Maggie's disappearance was teetering on the edge of being deprioritized, even though Ellison fought against it. In a regular briefing, when he presented the investigation summary, the room fell silent. No one objected when the department head stated that without new evidence, they could not continue allocating resources at the current level. A list of closure procedures was placed on the table: numbering, sealing, transferring the file to storage status. Ellison read the final report carefully. The language was dry but cutting, insufficient basis to classify this as a criminal case. No physical evidence recovered related to the vehicle or victim. No new suspect locations. Active investigation cannot continue. But the line that stuck in his throat was the very last note, one no investigator ever wants to write. If she's still out there, she's under the water. It wasn't a conclusion, it was surrender to the vast lake and the limited technology of the time. When the file was officially closed, all collected evidence was sealed and sent to cold storage at the Boulder Police Evidence Facility. Call logs, statements, scene photos, lake and route maps, faulty sonar reports, everything went into a box labeled 99BR214. That was where unsolved cases went into hibernation, not truly ended, but no longer moving. Ellison stood in front of the evidence shelves, watching the box slide into the bottom row. He had seen so many cases end up like this, most never reopened. Still, he wrote a short note and slipped it inside the file. If sonar technology improves in the future, rescan Union Reservoir, a slim hope, but it was the only thing he could still do for Maggie. Leaving headquarters that night, Ellison paused for a long time in the parking lot, the exact spot where Maggie had last disappeared from the hospital camera. The pale yellow sodium lights made everything look blurred, exactly like the feeling inside him. Among countless details, nothing was truly clear. The case was officially changed to inactive investigation. No more search teams, no more analysis meetings, no more tip calls. Only a heavy silence remained, along with the question that never received an answer: where is Maggie Chandler? When case file 99-BR-214 was placed into the Boulder PD archives, it became one of hundreds of unsolved missing persons cases in the state of Colorado. The name Maggie Chandler remained in the database, but the case itself went into hibernation. No assigned investigator, no resources, only the faint hope that someday, someone would find what the original team had missed. The case file was transferred to the CBI Cold Case Unit as routine procedure. There, dusty boxes were lined up in long rows, old maps, black and white photos, handwritten statements, and the vague notes of investigator Mark Ellison. Everything sat quietly in a large cardboard box labeled 99-BR-214, Chandler, Maggie, missing, suspicious circumstances. In the archives, some cases broke open after just a few months, when new DNA technology allowed reanalysis of evidence. But Maggie's file had no clothing, no tissue samples, no blood traces, only crime scene photos, route maps, and copies of Avery's statements, items that for years no one knew what to do with. There was nothing to run DNA against, no physical evidence for modern forensics. The case therefore always sat at the bottom of the priority list. Time passed, the old investigators retired, new ones arrived, and were busy with more urgent cases. An entire generation of Boulder police officers grew up without ever hearing the name Maggie Chandler. Only the CBI cold case file still preserved everything, waiting for a reason to be reopened. The change came from a completely unrelated project, CBI's cold case digitization program. When the unit began rescanning old maps, they realized that most missing persons cases from the 1980s and 1990s had relied on single-beam sonar, technology now considered obsolete. An internal scientific report concluded, in many cases, the probability that a vehicle sank, but went undetected, is very high. When the list of missing vehicle cases was compiled for re-evaluation, Maggie's file was among the first. Investigator Ellison's note, "If sonar technology advances, recheck Union Reservoir," suddenly became a valuable lead. After screening, the file was assigned to investigator Karen Holt, who had recently transferred to the cold case unit. Holt picked Maggie's case not because it was famous, but because something in Ellison's note made her pause, a patience, a forgotten hope. She opened the box and turned each page. Blurred crime scene photos, old maps marked in red ink, sonar reports that showed nothing but black streaks. Holt saw not deadlock, but gaps that new technology could fill. While reviewing the Union Reservoir bathymetric map, Holt noticed that the lake bottom had deep trenches running along the prevailing autumn wind direction, places where a small object like a Fiero could sink and remain stable for decades. This had never been mentioned in the original search reports, because the lake had never been surveyed with multi-beam depth modeling at the time. Questions began to form: if the car sank at an angle, could the old sonar have missed it? If mud covered it over time, could the car have become invisible in the old scan data? If Avery lied about when he left the hospital, did he drive straight to Union Reservoir? Sitting in a room full of file boxes, Holt knew she had just found a new starting point for a case everyone thought was buried. She wrote in the reactivation report, "No multi-beam survey has ever been conducted at Union Reservoir. Potential for locating a submerged vehicle is significant. Recommend deployment of multi-beam sonar." With that recommendation, Maggie's file was officially reactivated in the system. This was not just reopening an old case, it was reopening a path to a truth that had been missed for more than 2 decades. In the update sent to her superiors, Holt wrote the final line, "This case is not missing clues, it is missing technology." And with new technology, the search was about to begin again, this time, deeper. After reviewing the entire old file box, Karen Holt realized that the biggest weakness of the original investigation was not the people, but the technology. The single-beam sonar reports in the file showed scattered data, heavy noise, and limited scan angles. That meant if the Pontiac Fiero sank at an angle, or was partially buried in mud, the 1999 equipment almost certainly could not detect it. Holt proposed conducting a completely new survey using multi-beam sonar, technology capable of creating a high-resolution 3D model of the lake bottom, precise enough to detect objects only a few dozen centimeters long, even under mud. The feasibility report was quickly approved, because Union Reservoir is not in a protected area, and sonar scanning requires no complex permits. To carry it out, Holt contacted Echo Search and Dive Recovery, a civilian team specializing in locating missing vehicles. They had assisted many Colorado law enforcement agencies, and were known for their accurate sonar interpretation. They agreed to partner with CBI, providing the survey boat, multi-beam sonar equipment, and divers for recovery if needed. While re-examining the Union Reservoir map, Holt marked the highest probability areas. Soon she identified 3 locations of particular importance. Zone 1, deep trench in the southeast. This is where autumn winds typically blow, creating gentle currents that could carry a floating object dozens of meters after hitting the water. Old bathymetric maps showed this area had unusual depth, forming natural mud pockets. If the car fell there, it could lie undisturbed for decades. Zone 2, natural slope near the grassy shore, the place where tire skid marks were noted in Ellison's report. The gentle slope was just enough for a car to gain speed if driven deliberately. Though there was no definitive proof, it remained the spot where Maggie or a perpetrator might have reached the water. Zone 3, flat western bottom. This area had been ruled out, but the old sonar only partially covered it. Holt suspected it had never been fully surveyed. The flat terrain would allow sinking objects to be quickly covered by mud and become invisible to single-beam configurations. The Echo team looked at the map and nodded in agreement. The sonar operator, Keller, pointed to the southeast zone and said, "This is the kind of terrain that can swallow a small car whole. If the Fiero is down there, we'll see it." Holt replied with a certainty she rarely showed in other investigations. If that car went into the lake, it's still there. Nobody recovered it in all these years. There hasn't been a flood strong enough to drag it away. The only thing we've been missing is the right tool. She reread Ellison's old notes. As she suspected, the original report simply stated, sonar negative with no description of scan angles, depths, or coverage area. No detailed maps, no sonar images. Clearly, Ellison knew single-beam sonar was unreliable, which is why he left that note, hoping for future technology. Echo worked with Holt to establish the survey protocol, full multi-beam sonar coverage of 100% of the lake bottom. Create 3D maps of each zone, flagging every object with metallic characteristics. Send raw data to the modeling analysis team. Prioritize objects 10 to 15 feet in length, matching Fiero dimensions. Preparation ended when Holt printed the final lake map, marking the 3 zones in bold red ink. At the bottom, she wrote a sentence that Echo immediately noticed. "If the car is down there, we will find it." Not a guess, not vague hope. It was a statement grounded in fact, because for the first time since Maggie disappeared, sonar technology was strong enough to answer a question no one had been able to answer for 26 years. As Holt closed the file, she knew the moment to unlock the truth had arrived. Whatever had been missed at the bottom of the lake all those years ago would no longer be able to hide beneath the mud. The Echo Search and Dive Recovery survey boat, moved slowly across the surface of Union Reservoir, carrying multi-beam sonar equipment calibrated to the map that Karen Holt and the experts had prepared. The sonar screen began building bands of blue, yellow, black as layer after layer of the lake bottom appeared in sharp detail, like a laboratory terrain model. Holt stood right behind the operator, eyes glued to the screen, waiting for any shape that broke the natural pattern. The shallow areas near the grassy shore were scanned first. Submerged bushes, large roots, and accumulated rocks created chaotic but readable echoes. No metallic objects appeared. The old reports had labeled this area not suspicious, and the multi-beam sonar confirmed it in minutes. As the boat moved into the southeast zone, the water grew darker, and sunlight struggled to penetrate the greater depth. The operator switched to dense scan mode, sending 3 consecutive beams for maximum accuracy. Beneath them appeared a small, unusually deep valley, where wind and currents met, exactly as Holt had analyzed. Then against the flat bottom, an anomaly appeared. At first just a thin curve, then gradually a clearer shape, a flat, elongated object about 13 feet long. The operator zoomed in. The object's sharp outline emerged, half buried in mud, half showing straight, proportional lines consistent with an older sports car. Keller, Echo's sonar interpretation expert, exclaimed, "See that? The bright return on the right corner, that's the side mirror. The metal frame is still intact." Holt stayed calmer, but her heart was pounding. She asked to switch to angle slice mode. The cross-section appeared, low body, nearly flat roof, slightly raised rear. The structure could not be mistaken for a pickup, SUV, or boat. Everyone fell silent at the unmistakable profile, Pontiac Fiero. Continuing the scan, sonar revealed 2 other objects scattered nearby, one large mass shaped like an old truck, another heavily decayed. But only the third object, sitting right against the mud trench, had the perfect size and proportions of Maggie's car. The boat circled the area, scanning from multiple angles for confirmation. Despite the mud cover, the image remained consistent: roofline, window frames, protrusions that reflected sound waves like polished metal. Holt ordered GPS coordinates marked and logged into the system. Target 3. Suspected vehicle, length 13.1 feet, depth 27 feet, SE Basin. Keller dropped a marker buoy into the water. The buoy floated gently, fixed directly above the object. Holt leaned down to check the buoy line, as if to make sure this target would never be lost again. Further depth and structural analysis revealed one detail that caught everyone's attention. The object showed no long skid marks or heavy impact damage on the bottom. It simply rested neatly in a mud pocket. That matched the theory that the car was driven in deliberately, then sank straight, and settled by its center of gravity. No spinning, no bouncing, no violent flipping. Holt ordered all raw images saved, with notes. Frame integrity intact. Reflective surface at left angle suggests side mirror. Roofline consistent with Fiero model. She refused to jump to conclusions, but every indicator pointed to the obvious truth she had prepared herself for during months of reopening the file. Maggie's car was right there, separated from the world by only a few layers of mud and 2 decades of outdated technology. The boat made one final confirmation loop. Keller tapped the screen lightly. "Look at these straight lines. This isn't rock or driftwood, this is right angles, metal. The car is definitely down there." Holt exhaled quietly, keeping her voice steady. "All right, mark it as priority recovery target." She opened her tablet and entered the temporary field report. Object dimensions match Fiero. Clear metallic return signature. Location consistent with Maggie's possible route. Mud cover sufficient to evade old sonar. On the last line, she wrote by hand, something she rarely did on technical reports. "We may have found her car." The boat left the SE Basin, the buoy still floating on the calm surface. The whole lake seemed to be waiting for the recovery operation about to take place, the moment that could completely change a case that had lain in darkness for 26 years. The next day, a light mist hung over the surface of Union Reservoir. The orange buoy marking the location of the suspicious object still floated quietly in the southeast corner of the lake. Karen Holt and Byron Keller had been there since before dawn, working with the Echo Search and Dive Recovery Team to prepare for the most critical phase, recovering the vehicle believed to be Maggie Chandler's. First, they ran another sonar scan to confirm. The image hadn't changed. A flat object, 13 feet long, nearly 6 feet wide, lying on its side in the deep mud. Keller nodded. "That's it. Let's go down." A small ROV was deployed. On the monitor, murky silt appeared, then a dark shape gradually came into focus. The LED lights swept across the car's body, catching the faded word Pontiac on the trunk. Holt held her breath. As the camera tilted, the side mirror flashed, exactly matching the sonar anomaly from the day before. "Matches the dimensions of a 1984 Fiero," she said quietly. Keller replied, "We treat this like a crime scene." Keller briefed the protocol: establish a 50-meter exclusion zone, drop directional buoys, no civilian boats allowed. 2 dive teams were assigned, rigging to secure the lift straps and safety to monitor. Every action had to be called out loud and logged with timestamps. No breaking windows, no stirring the mud, no disturbing evidence, Holt reminded. 2 divers slipped into the cold water, their voices crackled through the headsets. "Tail of the vehicle in sight, can read Pontiac." They threaded soft straps under the chassis and attached them to 2 steel shackles connected to 5 8-inch cable that ran to the surface. On the boat, Keller hooked up the hydraulic winch and 2 2,000-pound lift bags to the front and rear axles. "Start the lift," he said. The pressure gauge crept upward, muddy water began to move. "Vehicle breaking free of the bottom," the diver reported. "Maintain 6 inches per minute." Everyone watched breathlessly as the depth reading dropped: 26, 24, 20 feet. At 15 feet, large bubbles rose, followed by a patch of dark red paint mixed with mud. "Hold it," Keller ordered. When the car fully surfaced, light hit the still intact Pontiac lettering on the trunk. The vehicle was slowly towed to the blocked-off ramp area. Holt and the CBI forensics team waited on shore, photographing every angle. The rear license plate was broken in half, but the first 3 characters, 2JZ, matched Maggie's registration exactly. She felt her chest tighten. No further confirmation was needed. At the ramp, the tow truck lowered its flatbed. The dive team guided the car into the rails, detached the lift bags, and winched it down until the tires touched lightly. Commands were called out clearly: 1114, remove bag 3, 1116, chock rear wheels. Once stable, Keller waved to pull it ashore. Black water poured from the door seams, carrying the smell of mud and metal from 2 decades below. Inside the temporary white evidence tent, Holt and technician Marta Diaz began the chain of custody. They assigned it case number CBI 99, BR 214 VHL, recorded coordinates, water temperature, wind direction, and time of surfacing. Diaz drew 3 water and mud samples, sealing each vial. The driver's window was intact and closed. "No opening doors here," Holt instructed. "All interior processing happens in the Denver clean room." Another technician gently cleaned the windshield area, revealing the VIN plate. Holt read it aloud. Diaz cross-checked. "Perfect match with Maggie Chandler's 1999 registration records." "VIN confirmed," Holt said, her voice dropping. Keller turned over small items recovered during the lift: bolts, plastic fragments, wire pieces. Everything was tagged, timed, initialed and signed for. Holt signed the transport manifest, the final line of a very long day. Vehicle secured for forensic transfer. The car was covered with a sealed tarp, evidence taped, and lead sealed at all 4 corners. The transport manifest listed the exact route to the CBI forensic garage in Denver, escort officers, and departure time. A Longmont officer recorded the entire process on a body cam. As the tow truck pulled away, Holt stood watching the lake return to calm. She remembered Ellison's note in the old file. If she's still out there, she's under the water. And now they had brought her back from that very place. At the CBI forensic garage in Denver, the car was wheeled straight into isolation. Industrial lights flicked on, water dripped onto the steel floor. A team waited with drip tarps, evidence refrigerators, and a cold-drying chamber for wet materials. A whiteboard read in big letters, CBI 99, BR 214, Vehicle Intake Protocol. Diaz read the checklist, full panoramic photos, all 4 sides, detail shots, logos, plates, glass, handles, hinge screws. Collect algae growth and seat mud samples. Do not start engine or remove spark plugs until engineering inspection. One technician dusted magnetic powder for prints on handles and dash. They knew the odds were nearly zero after 25 years underwater, but protocol was protocol. In the corner, Holt opened her laptop and updated the system. Case stat of homicide investigation. 1 click, but the line between missing and murdered. She looked through the observation window. The maroon Pontiac Fiero sat silent, the last drops falling to the floor in black streaks. Under the harsh lights, the word Pontiac still glowed faintly on the trunk, the first piece of evidence, and the period at the end of 25 years of waiting. Diaz sealed the mud samples and placed them in the evidence fridge. We open the interior tomorrow, she said. Holt signed the custody log one more time. Every signature was a step closer to the truth. On her way out of the garage, Holt typed a short note on her phone. Vehicle recovered intact, VIN match confirmed, chain of custody established. Case elevated to homicide due to submersion concealment. Outside, the Denver sky was pale gold. Sunset reflected off the glass buildings. She paused, took a deep breath, and whispered to herself. Ellison was right. She never really disappeared. She was just buried under the water. 2 days after the Pontiac Fiero was recovered, the forensic examination began at the CBI forensic garage in Denver. The area was sealed. Only personnel listed on the chain of custody were allowed inside. Karen Holt stood behind the observation glass, taking notes on every step performed by Marta Diaz's team. They started by draining the remaining water from the interior. Mud, debris and plant matter poured out in a thick sludge. As the floor dried, the interior layout became clear. The driver's seat was fully reclined and pushed all the way back. The left seat belt was pulled tight, buckle still locked. Holt watched the monitor and frowned. This was not a natural driving position. Diaz noted, seat fully reclined, belt locked under tension. Next, technicians removed the driver's door with specialized tools. As the mud was gently rinsed, personal items appeared. A Boulder Community Hospital ID badge, plastic yellowed but still readable, Maggie Chandler, a silver wristwatch stopped at 11:47 p.m., and a metal hair clip, stuck in the seat crease. Everything went into sterile evidence trays, was photographed, and tagged. On the passenger side floor, they located the nursing bag. Inside were a stethoscope, spare ID, a few gas receipts. One receipt was dated October 20th, 1999, 10:18 p.m., matching her shift end time. Holt exhaled, every detail confirmed. Maggie had left the hospital and gotten into her own car. But what sent a chill down her spine was the tightly locked seat belt, as if someone had fastened it around the victim after the car was already submerged. Forensic techs collected biological samples. From the seat cushion they recovered long light brown hairs with tissue still attached at the root, dried blood mixed with mud on the door handle and dashboard. Everything was sealed and sent to the DNA unit in the same building. Compared against medical records and a sample from the victim's mother, results confirmed. Hair and blood samples matched genetic profile of Maggie Chandler. The room went quiet for several seconds when the report printed. Holt felt the air grow heavier. This was no longer speculation. The missing woman had been located, and this was the last car she ever touched. But one more detail immediately shifted the entire case. While sampling the driver's seatbelt, Diaz discovered faint scratch marks and a short light-colored fiber caught on the edge. Under UV light, the area showed a faint protein reaction, indication of secondary human DNA. The technician cut the section of belt and sent it to the DNA lab. 2 days later, male DNA detected on driver's seatbelt and inner door handle. Holt read the report, gripping the pages tightly. A man was inside the car, she said, half statement, half realization. Diaz nodded, and if the victim was trapped, someone buckled her in. There's no other reason for male DNA on both the inside and outside of that belt. The engineering team checked for corrosion damage. No evidence of major impact. The front end was not crumpled, headlights intact. No signs of a crash, Diaz said. This car was deliberately put in the water. The conclusion made Holt's skin crawl. Every traffic accident theory from the past 25 years had just collapsed. They opened the rear trunk, where the engine was located. Among the thick mud was a 30 centimeters length of black rubber hose, cut on one end, with thin nylon fibers still attached. Diaz speculated, possibly used to tie a bag or pull a door closed. The item was collected, sealed, labeled VHL-17. Meanwhile, the DNA lab expanded analysis of the male sample. Because of low cell count, they used low copy number amplification. Results produced a full enough profile for CODIS entry, but no hits in Colorado's criminal database. No match, Holt said, scanning the report. So he's never been arrested. Diaz replied, we still have one option, genealogical matching. Holt nodded. She contacted the genealogy forensics lab in Fort Collins, specialists in civil ancestry database comparison. The next day the sample was packed in a cryo tube, shipped in a -20°C cooler, with a new chain of custody form. Sender, CBI Forensics Receiver, Genealogy Forensics Lab, Fort Collins. Sample ID, 99BR214MDNA01. Before shipping, Holt read the preliminary forensic report Diaz had just signed. Colorado Bureau of Investigation. Preliminary Forensic Summary Vehicle, 1984 Pontiac Fiero, VIN verified. Findings, no evidence of collision. Driver's seat reclined fully, belt locked under tension. Recovered items, hospital ID card, M. Chandler, wristwatch, stopped at 11:47 p.m., hair clip, nursing bag, blood and hair samples. DNA results, primary DNA, Maggie Chandler, secondary DNA, unidentified male, interpretation, evidence of secondary operator, inside vehicle prior to submersion. Holt folded the report and stared through the glass. In the garage, the car had been cleaned of mud. The bare red-brown frame looked both peaceful and eerie. She recalled the ROV footage, car on its side, doors closed, belt tight. No question left. Maggie had not driven into the lake herself. Walking out, Holt paused in the long hallway, where white light reflected off the metal floor. Only one thought remained, the unknown male DNA, the final piece that could lead them to Maggie Chandler's killer. That evening, she typed in her electronic log, forensic analysis confirms homicide scenario. Male DNA sample sent to Fort Collins Genealogy Lab, awaiting lineage match. The car didn't sink by itself, someone put her there. After the unknown male DNA from the Pontiac Fiero was sent to the Genealogy Forensics Lab in Fort Collins, preliminary results came back to CBI Denver. The very first line made Karen Holt stop breathing. Partial genetic overlap detected with Avery family lineage, Denver County, Colorado. The Avery family. She read the name over and over, then pulled the 1999 case file. Dr. Thomas Avery, internal medicine resident, the last person seen talking to Maggie. 25 years later, he still lived quietly in Denver, now a retired physician. Genetic overlap could not be coincidence. Holt contacted CBI's genealogy unit. Analyst Ethan Rhodes, who ran the data, explained over video. We took the DNA from the seatbelt and door handle, compared it against open databases, GED match, and family tree DNA. We got a roughly 25% match, with an Avery relative in Denver, possibly a grandson or nephew. We then worked backward through the family tree, and at the root level there was only one male of the right generation, born 1964. Holt said softly, Thomas Avery. Rhodes nodded. Random chance under 0.00002%. But for courtroom certainty, you need a direct sample. CBI immediately launched covert surveillance. Holt obtained a court order allowing collection of discarded DNA, no direct contact required. Thomas Avery, now 61, worked as a consultant at a small South Denver clinic. Every morning he drove a gray Subaru Forester, arrived at 8 a.m., left at 5 p.m., a perfectly routine life for someone never officially linked to a murder. A three-person surveillance team was assigned. They watched from unmarked cars in the clinic lot. On the third day, just before noon, Avery finished a takeaway coffee and tossed the paper cup and straw into the trash bin out back. As soon as he drove off, a plainclothes agent retrieved the cup with sterile tongs and placed it in an evidence bag. A used tissue he discarded at the same time was also collected. Both were labeled CBI Serve Item 21A Beverage Cup Source, Dr. T. Avery, Denver. CBI Serve Item 21B Tissue used. Holt signed for receipt and created a new chain of custody. The items went straight to the CBI DNA lab. 2 days later, when results were ready, she stood in the lab with technician Diaz. The monitor showed 2 long genetic sequences. The comparison lit up solid green, perfect match. The printer spat out the confirmation. Colorado Bureau of Investigation, Forensic DNA Division Report, number 99 BR 214 ABNA01. Survey 21A genetic match confirmed between evidence sample, Pontiac Fiero interior, driver's seatbelt and reference sample, discarded beverage cup, Dr. Thomas Avery, Denver, Colorado. Statistical probability of coincidental match, 1 in 4.8 trillion. Diaz looked at Holt without speaking. Holt just nodded, printed 2 sealed copies. So he was in the car, she said, voice steady but ice cold. No question left. They reviewed the entire file again. In the original investigation, Avery's DNA had never been collected, because he was never a formal suspect, only a person of interest. Godis never had his profile, so for 25 years the evidence inside the car remained anonymous. Now genealogical technology had torn down that wall. That afternoon, Holt presented the results to Lieutenant Stephen Marks and Special Prosecutor Linda Perez. The updated case folder lay on the table. Sir, Holt began, genetic analysis confirms the male DNA inside Maggie Chandler's vehicle belongs to Thomas Avery. 0 chance of random match, and the location of the sample on the driver's seatbelt indicates he was in the driver's seat at or after the time of the victim's death. Perez frowned. He claimed he only walked her to the car, never got inside. Correct, but his DNA is inside, not on the outer door. Impossible to explain by brief contact. Marks flipped to the first page of the report, voice low. 1 in 4.8 trillion. Can't be error. He set his pen down and signed the request form. Sufficient probable cause for arrest warrant. That same night, Holt and the legal team drafted the criminal complaint and arrest warrant application. Evidence was listed in detail. Victim's vehicle found submerged with Avery's DNA throughout the interior. Seatbelt locked under tension. Driver's seat fully reclined. Evidence of manipulation. No collision damage, ruling out accident. Direct DNA match with Avery's discarded cup. Random probability essentially 0. Possible motive personal relationship. Doctor-victim. Romantic conflict. When all paperwork was complete, warrant number 25 Matcher 0719 was signed by the Boulder County judge at 10:42 p.m. Holt held the copy and stared at the bold line. Suspect, Dr. Thomas Avery. Homicide, cold case 99 BR 214. 25 years ago, he had walked out of an interview room, a free man. Tomorrow morning, he would be led out in handcuffs. She stood quietly for a moment, looking at the photo of Maggie Chandler pinned to the caseboard. The young woman in her white hospital uniform, gentle smile, under the fluorescent lights, gazing back from a quarter-century away. Holt whispered, just loud enough for herself, "We have him, Maggie." Finally. Dawn was just breaking, fog, blanketing the quiet streets of Louisville, Colorado. An unmarked black SUV pulled up in front of a two-story brick house at the end of Pine Creek Court. Inside, Karen Holt and the CBI task force, along with Boulder County Sheriff's deputies, double-checked the warrant. Bold letters across the top of the page read, "Arrest warrant, Dr. Thomas Avery, 61, for the homicide of Maggie Chandler, case 99 BR 214, 6:05 a.m. Two officers approached the front door and knocked hard. "Dr. Avery, this is the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. We have a warrant for your arrest. Please open the door." No sound. A few seconds later, the door cracked open, and a silver-haired man in gray pajamas appeared. He looked around, his eyes more weary than afraid. "Thomas Avery?" Holt asked. "Yes." "What?" "You are under arrest for the suspected murder of Maggie Chandler in October 1999. You have the right to remain silent, and the right to an attorney." Avery stood still, offering no resistance as the cuffs went on. He only asked quietly, "You found the car?" Holt answered curtly, "And your DNA inside it." Avery's expression didn't change. He just gave a slight nod, as if he had known this day would come. The house was searched under the accompanying warrant. In the first-floor office, forensics seized a 1999 on-call logbook, pages yellowed with age, the cover reading Boulder Community Hospital, Internal Medicine. When Holt flipped to October, she stopped at the last entry, October 20th, on call until 11:30 p.m. Beneath it was a thin left-slanted signature. She compared it to Avery's verified signature from hospital personnel files, noticeably different. The new strokes were shaky and shorter, someone trying to imitate. As the text kept sweeping, they found a printed 1999 discharge schedule in a desk drawer listing patients released the evening of October 20th. In the bottom corner was a signature T. Avery, but the handwriting differed from every other administrative document of the era. Holt made a note, possible falsified log, to support alibi. Behind the house, a small storage shed was packed with old boxes. One contained hospital records, thank you letters, and a 1998 group photo of the nursing staff. In the front row, Maggie Chandler was beaming. Avery stood at the far end, his expression unreadable. Holt studied the photo for a long time, then carefully slipped it into an evidence bag. 7:10 a.m. Avery was led to the SUV. Curious neighbors cracked their doors. A few recognized the doctor, who used to work in Boulder years ago. "What's going on?" one asked. But no one answered. The SUV door slammed shut, and the vehicle rolled away from the quiet cul-de-sac. News spread fast that morning. By noon, local online papers all ran the same headline: CBI arrests former Boulder doctor in 1999. Cold case, genetic evidence links him to missing nurse. TV stations replayed footage of the cordoned-off house and officers carrying out boxes of old files. The Boulder medical community was stunned. Former colleagues, who had always thought Maggie's case was just a tragic accident, were reeling that the arrested man had once worked right beside her. At CBI headquarters in Denver, Holt received the updated evidence report. Seized items included the 1999 on-call log, printed discharge schedule, hospital group photo, handwriting samples, and personal data storage devices. Everything was sealed in CBI evidence bags, labeled CBI 99, BR 214 Evidia 1 through a 6. When Avery was brought into the interview room, he said nothing. On his calm face, Holt saw only cold exhaustion, like a man who had been waiting 25 years to be asked the same old questions again. She watched him through the one-way glass, feeling a mix of satisfaction and heaviness. A case everyone thought was buried forever was finally seeing daylight. Somewhere in the back of her mind, Ellison was surely smiling. The CBI Denver interview room was bright, cold, and silent. Dr. Thomas Avery sat across from Karen Holt, wrists lightly cuffed in front of him, gray shirt wrinkled. Beside her was legal investigator Marcus Reed, tasked with taking the official statement. On the table sat a thick case file and a printout of the DNA report, page after page covered in genetic code. Holt began, voice steady. "Dr. Avery, you understand why you're here." Avery looked down and nodded slightly. "Because of Maggie Chandler." "Right, you were the last person to see her, and now we have new evidence that puts you inside her car." He took a deep breath, eyes flickering, then said slowly, "It wasn't murder, it was an accident." I panicked. His first words in 25 years landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Holt leaned forward. "Tell me exactly what you mean by accident." Avery swallowed hard. "We argued. She wanted to end everything between us. I just wanted to talk. Then she fell and hit her head on the car door. I thought she was dead. I didn't know what to do except get the car out of there." Holt stared without blinking. "And you drove that car to Union Reservoir?" He was quiet for a few seconds, then nodded. "I just wanted to hide the car. I didn't want anyone thinking I hurt her." "You didn't call the police?" "No. I was afraid I'd lose my medical license." Holt opened the file and pulled out the hospital badge swipe log. "You told investigators you left the hospital at 10:50. Avery nodded. "But the system shows you swiped out at 11:26 p.m. The exact time security cameras recorded Maggie's car leaving the parking lot. You lied about the time." Avery stared at the table. Holt continued, tone even, "Your DNA was found on the interior door handle and the driver's seat belt. Can you offer any explanation other than you personally buckled that belt?" "No," he whispered, voice breaking. "I remember trying to keep her still, then I buckled it. I thought she might still be breathing. I didn't know what else to do." "So why was the seat pushed all the way back?" He closed his eyes. "I needed room to reach the belt, and then I drove away." The room fell dead silent. Reed scribbled furiously. Holt slowly slid the DNA report in front of Avery and pointed to the bold line. "Genetic match confirmed. Probability 1 in 4.8 trillion. This is your DNA, Dr. Avery. Not just in the car, but on the driver's seat belt itself, proof you sat in that seat. She couldn't have buckled herself and then driven into the lake." Avery stared at the page for a long time. His eyes dropped, hands trembling slightly. Holt said nothing more, just waited. After a long minute, he exhaled hoarsely. "I didn't mean to kill her. I just thought if anyone found out, I'd lose everything." Holt asked softly, "Did you push the car into the water?" Avery didn't answer. He turned his face slightly, eyes fixed on the white wall. 1 minute, 2 minutes passed. Only the scratch of Reed's pen broke the silence. Finally Holt said, "This is your only chance to tell the truth." He just shook his head. "I already told you. Accident." Reed glanced at Holt. She closed the file, voice lowering. "All right. But you know evidence doesn't lie." As she left the room, Reed read the closing summary. Subject admitted to being inside victim's vehicle post-incident. Claimed accidental death, no intent. Refused further cooperation after DNA confirmation. Holt paused at the door, hearing the recorder click off with a cold snap. In the official report, Reed's summary line was bolded. Subject ceased communication after DNA presentation. That same afternoon, prosecutor Linda Perez announced preliminary charges. The counts listed second-degree murder, for causing death with intent but without premeditation. Evidence tampering, for concealing moving and submerging the vehicle containing the victim's body. To the press, Perez said simply, "Genetic evidence, the suspect's statements, and scene analysis show Maggie Chandler's death was not accidental. We believe the truth has been buried for 2 decades, and now it's time for it to surface." The news swept across Colorado. Images of Avery being escorted out of CBI went viral on major networks. A once respected doctor now in handcuffs, head bowed, surrounded by camera flashes. Former colleagues were speechless. Former patients couldn't believe it. That night, Holt sat alone in her office replaying the interrogation recording. Avery's hoarse voice echoed, "I panicked." She added her final note to the investigative file, "Fear is not an accident." He chose silence, then concealment. The case officially moved to criminal prosecution. After 25 years, Maggie Chandler finally had a voice in her own file. 3 weeks after the interrogation, the Pontiac Fiero remained sealed inside the CBI forensic garage isolation bay. As Prosecutor Perez prepared the formal charging documents, the forensics team announced they needed to reopen the floor pan to collect additional mud samples from beneath the driver's seat. Karen Holt was present when the car was moved to the low-pressure wash area. No one expected they were about to find the final piece of evidence. When the last layer of mud was vacuumed from the metal floor, technician Marta Diaz spotted something small glinting in the murky water. She leaned in and lifted it with tweezers, an ivory white bone fragment the length of 2 fingers. Nearby, wedged in an iron crevice, was a silver-plated wristwatch with a shattered crystal, hands frozen at 11:47 p.m. The exact watch Maggie wore in 1999 photos. Diaz signaled an immediate halt and called Holt. The entire garage fell silent. Holt approached, gloved up, and examined the objects in the stainless tray. The bone was worn smooth, one end fractured naturally. "Possibly a human finger phalanx," Diaz said quietly. A quick X-ray confirmed joint structure consistent with an adult index and middle finger. Beneath the driver's seat, in the remaining unwashed mud, they continued searching. 4 more small bone fragments were scattered around the seat tracks. Emergency protocol was activated. The whole area was sealed off. High-intensity lights switched on. The fragments were collected with sterile tweezers and placed into evidence boxes labeled CBI 99, BR 214 REM 01 through 06. Diaz logged each position, depth, condition. The samples were rushed to CBI's forensic anthropology lab. Preliminary results confirmed, adult human bone, female size consistent with Maggie Chandler 5'5". Notably, one wrist bone still had dried skin tissue and a broken piece of the watch band attached. "No doubt left," Holt said, voice low. She was still in the car. For positive identification, the lab used dental and mitochondrial DNA comparison, extracting DNA from bone marrow and matching it against 1999 dental records and a maternal reference sample. 48 hours later, the official report landed on Holt's desk. Colorado Bureau of Investigation, Forensic Identification Report Specimen, skeletal remains recovered from vehicle CBI 99, BR 214 VHL. Comparison dental and mitochondrial DNA match confirmed with Maggie Chandler, DOB September 12, 1975. Probability of misidentification, 1 in 3.2 billion. Conclusion, human remains identified as belonging to Maggie Chandler. Holt read it in silence. She only looked through the glass at the motionless car, under the white lights. 25 years and finally, the victim had come home. At the same time, the medical examiner conducted a supplemental autopsy on the recovered fragments. Soft tissue and cervical bone analysis revealed compression injuries to the neck, hyoid fracture and microscopic abrasions consistent with manual strangulation. No crash-related fractures. Cause of death, asphyxia due to manual strangulation prior to submersion. The report went straight to the DA's office. Perez skimmed it, then said simply in a meeting with Holt, "Now we have everything: weapon, motive, DNA, and victim confirmation. This is no longer a hypothetical case. This is intentional murder." Holt added the final line to her investigative log: "Victim recovered from vehicle interior. Cod manual strangulation. Evidence confirms homicide." The next day, The ME finalized the master file and uploaded it to the central system. On Holt's screen, the case status changed, from homicide investigation to case solved, victim recovered. She printed the report and read every line again. Human remains in driver compartment. DNA match to victim. Watch stopped at 11:47 p.m. Established time of death. Neck fracture, strangulation marks. Death prior to submersion. Suspect Avery's DNA in vehicle. Confirmed manner of death. Homicide. Late that afternoon, Holt returned to the garage where the Fiero now sat as nothing more than a cleaned metal shell. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching the faded silver Pontiac lettering. On the table beside it, the watch and 6 small bones lay sealed in evidence boxes. She stood there a long time, then whispered, "Welcome home, Maggie." The search phase of the case was officially closed. After 25 years, what remained of the young woman had finally been brought up from the water, and the truth, like her, could no longer stay buried. After the remains of Maggie Chandler were confirmed, CBI established a dedicated task force to compile all physical evidence and fully reconstruct the events of the night of October 20, 1999. The briefing took place in the Central Analysis Room in Denver, under cold white lights. On the large screen, every piece of the case was presented: DNA, fingerprints, vehicle mechanics, Union Reservoir hydrology. The DNA comparison results were verified by 3 independent labs: CBI Forensic, Genealogy Lab Fort Collins, and FBI Quantico. The male genetic profile matched Dr. Thomas Avery's sample with an absolute certainty, random match probability 1 in 4.8 trillion. That profile was found on the driver's seatbelt, interior door handle, and gear shift, proving he occupied the driver's seat and operated the vehicle after the victim was already dead. Maggie's female DNA appeared on the passenger seatbelt and floor, consistent with her body being placed or dragged into the front passenger seat before the car sank. Using 3D surface scanning and laser reflection technology, the technical team recovered faint fingerprints on the dry metal portion of the driver's door. Comparison with Avery's 1999 archived prints yielded 8 perfect matching points, meeting legal standards for positive identification. No other prints were present, ruling out a third party. In the accident reconstruction lab, mechanical engineer Evan Doyle and his team ran 3D simulations of the vehicle entering the water. They recreated Union Reservoir's 1999 structure using geological data and period hydrological maps. The model showed, if the car left the west bank along the old trail at a 17-degree slope, a minimum speed of 22 miles per hour, of 35 kilometers, was required for it to roll freely into the water. However, the trail was not long enough to reach that speed by gravity alone, meaning the accelerator had to be deliberately pressed. The Pontiac Fiero's mechanical system was thoroughly examined. The manual transmission was left in first gear, gear shift engaged, parking brake released, steering wheel locked half a turn, all of which ruled out accidental rolling. Expert Doyle concluded, the vehicle was intentionally driven into the water at 22 miles per hour. The operator then either exited or was never inside. Experts from the Colorado Water Research Center provided 1999 Union Reservoir hydrological data. On the night of October 20th, water levels were high, with northwest winds at 9 miles per hour, matching the direction of the vehicle's discovered location. Currents and wind drifted the car an additional 20-25 meters after entry. Simulations showed that a natural submersion would have caused the vehicle to flip due to the lakebed slope. In reality, the car rested in a balanced position, proof the steering wheel had been manually locked. One expert stated, the driver locked the steering wheel before the car hit the water. That cannot happen in an accident. This was a staged scene. Analysis of lake sediment revealed an average year-round temperature below 45 degrees Fahrenheit, high clay mineral content, and near anaerobic conditions, essentially a biological vacuum that preserved organic material for decades. Thanks to this, Maggie's DNA, hair and bone tissue remained identifiable after 26 years. Experts noted, the cold temperature and thick clay mud protected the evidence from decomposition, inadvertently preserving the entire story at the bottom of the lake. By combining sonar data, GPS and terrain modeling, the team reconstructed the vehicle's path. Maggie left the hospital parking lot at 11:15 p.m., heading toward Longmont. Avery left at 11:26 p.m., traveling the same route. Travel time from Boulder to Union Reservoir 17-19 minutes, matching the 11:45 p.m. timeframe when the victim's watch stopped. At the lake, tire tracks visible in 1999 photographs, archived in the Ellison file, matched the 17 degrees slope trail. Combined with simulation data, the team concluded, Avery parked his own car, switched to driving the Fiero, transported Maggie's body to the lake, fastened the seatbelt to secure the corpse, slid the driver's seat all the way back to avoid obstruction, then accelerated and pushed the car into the water. As the vehicle began to sink, he exited through the driver's door, walked along the shore, returned to his own car, and fled the scene. In the conclusion section, the reconstruction team wrote, physical evidence from vehicle structure, mechanical positioning, and hydrological data collectively indicate deliberate vehicle submersion. No evidence of collision or mechanical failure. Configuration of seat, belt and gear pattern, consistent with human manipulation post-mortem. Estimated speed at entry, 22 miles per hour. Steering locked at impact angle 14 degrees. Determination intentional homicide and concealment by operator. More than 20 specialists from 4 agencies, CBI Forensics, Quantico Consulting, Water Research Center, and Department of Justice Engineering, signed off on the report. The final document exceeded 200 pages and included 63 sonar images and 3D reconstructions, 45 pages of DNA and fingerprint analysis, 38 mechanical diagrams and movement timelines, 20 pages of legal conclusions regarding intent and evidence tampering. Holt was the last to sign. As she put pen to paper, she recalled investigator Ellison's 2000 note, "If she's still out there, she's under the water." Now that statement was fully closed by irrefutable scientific proof. Late that afternoon, the final technical report, CBI 99-BR 214, was electronically transmitted to the Boulder County District Attorney's Office. On the cover page in bold letters, intentional homicide and concealment, confirmed by multidisciplinary evidence. When Holt looked at the heavy document on her desk, she knew the case had reached the point of no return. No more speculation, no more accident, only the cold truth, preserved for 26 years in cold mud, now risen to the surface, gleaming like metal under laboratory lights. Boulder County Courthouse, March 2026. Early spring was still cold. Melting snow lingered slowly on the sandstone roof of the old courthouse. Crowds packed the sidewalk outside. Television crews waited. Cameras pointed at the entrance where the police convoy had just stopped. When the door opened, Dr. Thomas Avery, now 62, stepped out in a light gray suit, hands lightly cuffed in front. He kept his head down, avoiding the lenses. 26 years after that fateful night, he returned to Boulder, no longer as a doctor, but as a defendant accused of murder. Inside the courtroom, prosecutor Linda Perez represented the state of Colorado, facing the defense team led by Martin Dwyer. Behind Perez sat investigator Karen Holt, the woman who had pulled this case from the lake bottom into the light. Neatly stacked on the prosecution table was a 200-plus page copy of the CBI final technical report, along with hard drives containing sonar data, 3D images, and DNA results. When Judge Eleanor Marsh declared the trial open, the air in the room thickened. The people of the state of Colorado v. Thomas Avery, charged with second-degree murder and evidence tampering, in connection with the death of Maggie Chandler, 1999. Perez rose first. Her voice was low and steady. "Your Honor, this was not an accident. This was a meticulously staged murder, hidden for more than 2 decades. We will prove that the defendant, Thomas Avery, intentionally caused the death of Maggie Chandler, a 24-year-old nurse, and then sank her car to erase all traces. On the screen, sonar footage played. Ghostly images appeared from the depths of Union Reservoir, the car frame, the word Pontiac, glints of reflected glass. Next came the 3D reconstruction, showing the slope, the slide path, and the 22 miles per hour entry speed. Perez pointed at the graphic, no collision, no braking, no chance of survival. Then she displayed the DNA comparison chart, one side from the seat belt, the other from trash discarded at Avery's clinic. Bold text appeared, genetic match, 1 in 4.8 trillion. This was not an accident, Perez repeated. This was the defendant's hand, the only person in the driver's seat, when that car was pushed into the lake. Defense objected, moving to suppress the genealogical evidence as a privacy violation. Judge Marsh denied it. The sample was lawfully collected from public trash. Proceed. When Karen Holt took the stand, she detailed the case reopening process. Her voice even, eyes fixed on the jury. We found the defendant's DNA in locations only the driver could touch. Steering wheel locked, parking brake down, driver's seat pushed all the way back. That is staging, not panic. Perez asked, "Did you find any evidence of an accident?" "No, Your Honor. The car was deliberately driven into the water." When the prosecution rested, Attorney Dwyer stood. He leaned on the lectern, voice soft and measured. "Your Honor, my client is not a murderer. He is a man who made a terrible mistake in a moment of panic. Maggie Chandler fell during an argument. He believed she was dead, and in blind terror he did the wrong thing. That was an accident, not premeditated crime." He held up an old photo, Maggie and Avery at the hospital, smiling warmly. "No motive, no plan, just fear. We cannot call that murder." But when Perez cross-examined, she was not harsh. She simply displayed the watch stopped at 11:47 p.m. "Your Honor, when this watch stopped, the victim was already dead, not from a fall, but from strangulation. And the only person whose DNA was on the seat belt, used to strangle her, is the defendant." On the 6th day of trial, the autopsy report was presented. Forensic pathologist Dr. Claire Nguyen explained in detail, classic hyoid bone fracture and compression marks from manual strangulation, inconsistent with a fall or self-inflicted injury. Dwyer tried. The bone could have broken when the car sank. Dr. Nguyen replied firmly, "No, counselor. The fracture occurred while the victim was still alive." In her closing, Perez stepped forward and spoke slowly. Maggie Chandler was robbed of her youth, her future children, her life, all because someone feared for his reputation. For 26 years that lake kept silent for him. But today, we can do what the water could not: give her back her voice. The courtroom fell silent. Only the scratch of the clerk's pen could be heard. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. At 4:45 p.m., they returned. The foreperson was asked, "Have you reached a verdict?" The answer came clear and firm: "Guilty, on the charge of second-degree murder." No one breathed loudly. Avery closed his eyes, shoulders sagging. From the back row, Holt watched him, feeling not triumph, but closure. 1 week later, Judge Marsh pronounced sentence. For the crimes of second-degree murder and intentional concealment of evidence, the defendant is sentenced to 30 years imprisonment. No possibility of parole. Behind them, Maggie's mother collapsed in tears, clutching her daughter's photograph. Perez stood and filed the case closing documents. The cover read clearly, Case 99 BR 214, victim recovered, offender convicted, closed. Outside the courthouse, wind from the Front Range blew hard, carrying cold mist from Union Reservoir. Holt stepped onto the courthouse steps and looked in that direction. There Maggie Chandler had once sunk with her little red car. Now justice had pulled her back to the surface. She opened her notebook and wrote the final line in the case journal, after 26 years silence finally spoke. April 20th, 2026, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, CBI officially closed file 99-BR-214, the Maggie Chandler case. The last entry on the electronic system changed from active to closed, ending an investigation that had spanned more than a quarter century. In the quiet office, investigator Karen Holt signed the final report, feeling a mixture of relief and emptiness after the long journey. On her desk lay the 300-page internal technical report, summarizing the entire investigation. The first page read, Internal Report, CBI 99-BR-214, Case Study in Long-Term Evidence Preservation and Cold Case Resolution. The report highlighted that multi-beam sonar and ROV cameras were the breakthroughs that cracked the case. The 2025 lake bottom scan of Union Reservoir located the buried car frame just 80 feet from the original search zone. The civilian ROV captured close-up images of the vehicle, the first evidence from a civilian team, accepted by the court. Technical note: multi-beam sonar imaging validated as admissible evidence under Colorado state law. Part 2 analyzed the biggest breakthrough, forensic genealogy. The male DNA from the seatbelt was sent to the genealogy forensics lab in Fort Collins and matched against national genealogy databases. The trail led straight back through the Avery family tree to Dr. Thomas Avery, the only surviving suspect. The report stressed that perfect chain of custody discipline was what made every piece of evidence admissible. Every sample signed, sealed, and logged, truth preserved by precision. A dedicated chapter recognized the collaboration between CBI and the civilian dive team, Echo Search and Dive Recovery. They provided equipment, expertise, and community funding to support the official investigation. The CBI director wrote in the summary, "Without this partnership, the Chandler case would still lie at the bottom of Union Reservoir. This is the model for 21st century cold case investigation." The specialist combined 4 pillars of evidence: DNA, 100% match to Thomas Avery; mechanics, vehicle entered water at 22 miles per hour, steering locked; hydrology, cold clay mud preserved the scene for 26 years; forensic pathology, hyoid fracture confirmed manual strangulation. The final conclusion was printed in bold: intentional homicide and concealment by operator. On April 22, the complete file CBI 99-BR-214 final was transferred to the Boulder County DA, with the note, "Case solved after 26 years, justice achieved through science." That same afternoon, Holt cleared her desk. Before turning off the light, she looked at the photo of Maggie Chandler, the young woman in her nurse's uniform, eyes kind and calm. "You're home," she whispered. On local television, a special report replayed the final images: sonar sweeping the lake floor, 3D models, matching DNA strands. The female anchor's voice was low and measured against the background music. "Justice waits, even beneath the cold waters of Colorado." The screen faded to black, only the sound remained, ping 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 ping, of the sonar, echoing like the steady breath of justice beneath cold water. Final text appeared on the dark screen: Case 99-BR-214, closed in memory of Margaret Chandler, 1975-1999. Outside, Union Reservoir lay calm. Spring wind passed over it, raising a few small ripples that quickly vanished. At last, the truth had surfaced, and Colorado quietly closed a case that had been buried in cold water for 26 years. Looking back from the red Pontiac Fiero at the bottom of Union Reservoir to a 30-year sentence with no parole, Maggie Chandler's story offers today's Americans a few very specific reminders. First, modern justice rests on science and procedural discipline. Multi-beam sonar, ROV cameras, genealogy DNA, and strict chain of custody, turned a 26-year-old dead file into a solved case. So in everyday life, value evidence over feelings, save texts, emails, calendars, doorbell video. If something happens, call 911 immediately and leave the scene untouched. Second, personal safety should never be left to chance. Maggie had mentioned being followed before her night shift at Boulder Community Hospital. If you work late, ask for an escort to your car, share your live location, and demand your workplace provide lighting, cameras, and security patrols. That's not asking too much, it's the bare minimum. Third, community and state working together can change everything. CBI invited the civilian Echo Search and Dive Recovery Team to run the sonar. The lesson is that nonprofits, citizen groups, and community-funded technology can fill public resource gaps as long as everything is transparent and legal. Fourth, professional integrity is a bright moral line. Avery altering his checkout time shows that every little fix of the truth starts a slippery slope. In hospitals, schools, offices, treat logs and records as your professional oath. Finally, persistence pays. Investigator Karen Holt reopened the file because she noticed the lake had never been scanned with multi-beam sonar, and that winter water levels were 6 feet lower. One small detail changed everything. The lesson: always revisit old data with new tools. Justice can wait a very long time. Justice waits, even beneath the cold waters of Colorado, but it only arrives for those who prepare well, raise the alarm early, and never give up. Thank you for following to the end of the journey to find justice for Maggie Chandler, proof that the truth can be buried, but never destroyed. Please subscribe to the channel so we can continue exploring other cold cases across America, where justice is still waiting to be awakened.